two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwukta.
This is Merps. Welcome back. Micro adjusts have not happened yet. That's the news. We're done. We can just end this and talk when micro adjustments come back.
Let's wait for the meta to actually be what the meta should be. And what they did do, though, is that they haven't done nothing, right? Blizzard made bucket adjustments. And you'll see Wrap Golem in a much better bucket on the bottom of the first bucket, I think. And you will see Fungomancer, I think, also bottom of the first now, which is nice. You know, Fungomancer, it's good that they're still moving old cards that are coming back into the meta. Very nice of them to do that. They, however, did not tell us where all the buckets are. They apparently, it's a miscommunication between the design team and the PR team where it should have been released in a blog post, but it just wasn't. So we're waiting for that. Hopefully it'll come in next week because it's already done. They just have to release it. And once that happens, we'll update the tier list and we'll look again deeper and see where we can get some advantages and values and do a full breakdown. It's just kind of pointless to do a full breakdown now with buckets or where we assume buckets are going to be and all that stuff. We'll wait for the official data.
Yep. So that's sort of the where we're at, and micro adjustments should happen shortly after the bucket change, which happened a few days ago.
So I'm gonna say a week and a half.
Who knows? Right before the new Twitch Rivals event. Right?
Yeah. There's a new Twitch Rivals event that's happening next
August 27th.
August 27th.
So, if you're listening to this either currently on Sunday or you're listening on Monday, then it is not the coming Tuesday, but it is the next Tuesday. So the 27th of August. All we know about it so far is that they have advertised it on Twitter. They're saying that 36 streamers will battle as trios, not duos, like we did for the last two Twitch Rivals event.
So that's 12 teams, which means 12 people are invited. We know Shady's been invited as teaming up with Collins and Dreads, and that's the only arena player that we know that's been invited. So we have not, neither of us have been invited. Hopefully we'll get invited, but we'll see. And if we're not invited, hopefully some other arena streamers get invited. So there's more than 1/12 representation of arena players in the arena tournament. So that's the Twitch Rivals thing. So we're kind of in the air as to our participation, but it's going to be fun whether we're in it or not. You guys should watch it. It is next Tuesday, and it's going to be. I'm sure there'll be some rule differences and things that are going to come out in the next week or so. So all that news aside. That's all a lot of news, right? Normally Arena doesn't get that much news. But on top of all that, on top of a new tournament, on top of a rebucketing, on top of a announcement by Ixar that we will get bucket information next week, there's an even bigger announcement.
There is a huge announcement, and this happened yesterday, on Saturday. Ixar replied to a thread on Reddit, and I think it's important that we read this verbatim. So he basically wrote two paragraphs. The first one talks about micro adjust and how they're coming. So I'll just read the second paragraph, and this is exactly what he wrote. For 15.4, that's a new patch, we're going to try doing an arena patch without buckets and have all cards be part of one giant pool. This is similar to how the early days of Arena worked. Theoretically, buckets made individual arena decisions a little more interesting and put more weight behind how a card works in the deck you are drafting versus its power level in a vacuum. While I think there is some truth to this, I don't think it's been a well-received change overall. For players new or inexperienced with Hearthstone, the idea of having obvious choices is a win. For hardcore players, if the change to buckets is not a clear upside, which has been most of the feedback we've received here, then it's probably just not worth doing. One positive part of not doing buckets is that the micro adjustment patches should happen faster in the future, because there does not need to be a preliminary bucket adjustment patch to set the stage. End. Right.
Okay.
There.
So,
So,
a few assumptions and notes, the background for this. One is we don't know when this patch is coming, but it's not like
yep.
happening next week. Like XR said, like it's gonna happen like a number of weeks from now. So don't think like, oh, we're just gonna wait for buckets to be over. No, we're still gonna be in the arena meta for quite some time before this patch, whenever it is, actually happens. Two, it doesn't mean buckets are gone for good. They may come back. They're testing a patch without it. It will be very easy to bring buckets back into the arena in whatever form. And three, this was all kind of foreseeable. If you the Taro had made a post in Arena HS about when he was on the Lightforge with me on Lightforge 201, and during that Lightforge, he had discussed a lot of things like ways to fix the bucket system and or just get rid of the bucket system, some fundamental issues with the bucket system, and we kind of came to the conclusion that like Blizzard's probably not going to do all that stuff, and they'll just get rid of the buckets at some point. Like, I've been saying that once wall rotation hit, everything's going to be a mess, and they'll do something big. They'll have to in order to like make the arena better. One of the easiest ways to do something big is to get rid of a bulky, like existing system that requires a lot of upkeep, and that's the bucket system. So from Ixar's post, it seemed like the bucket system and the micro adjust system weren't working together seamlessly, which is understandable. They came in during different times. Probably different people programmed it, different people thought about it, and they were working together, sort of. It was a bit messy. No one really knew. Like, offering rates are also never what Blizzard tells you they are. Like,
no.
It's clearly they didn't. They had lost control of their own system, ignoring the fact that whether the systems are good or not. At least they weren't in full control of the systems, and we didn't have all the information.
If you remember multiple times, and we've addressed this in previous Lightforges, we would sort of see all of these quirks, and none of it made sense, right? We spoke with ZD Man, people within the community like Taro did these analyses, and they just didn't understand. There were just these anomalies. It's like, how could these similar cards, like for example, class creatures that were from a specific set, it's like, how are they being offered at such different rates? And then when we presented this to Blizzard, they didn't have a great answer, so between, it's like, we used to have spell bonuses, right? Like spell bonuses and micro adjust.
We still have spell bonus.
Sure, but we have like different spell bonuses. We have sort of
I like your people who are listening
cards
right now on the podcast. You can't see Merps's hand movements, but
it
basically looks like everything is happening and nothing is, and you're confused. And they're excellent hand movements, and I think that really captures the situation of what was happening between buckets and micro adjusts, not just from the
Blizzard
perspective of the community, but from Blizzard.
Their clarity of the situation. Like, it really seemed they didn't really know what was going on, because they created just this complex machine. It's like those machines that you flip a switch and then it takes 5 minutes, everything happens. What was it, Rube Goldberg machines? So like just like crack an egg, right? That's the thing. It's like, oh, balance. Okay, let's create this really complex thing just to crack an egg, and then when the egg doesn't crack, you're like, oh shoot, what part of it messed up? No, it's exactly it, right? It's like, oh, did the hamster not run on the wheel? Did the bowling ball kind of like not hit the pin at the end? Did the hot air balloon not travel far enough? Is that why the egg didn't crack? Like, no, this is like exactly how you view the arena nowadays. It's insane.
Yeah, and they did that because they couldn't crack an egg, which everyone looked at them and said, wow, you have many, many smart people who should really know how to do this. How are you not able to crack an egg? And they were like, well, we're going to make this huge system to try to crack the egg. Look, is it working? And we're like, yeah, sort of, kind of. It cracks sometimes. Maybe now, like, what I'm hoping and what I think is going to happen is they're not just taking a retreat from the bucket system and like that this is it, no more development in the arena. I think what's going to happen is they're going to retreat from the bucket system and like do something they're actually capable of handling. The bucket system is great, not in the way that it's implemented, It's great if there's someone who knows what they're doing with some objective standard at the top that has decision-making power. Whether that is a man or a machine, there needs to be someone doing that. And they either did not have that, or they had it and it was just someone or a machine that was really, 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 really bad at its job.
I think that is something that the vast majority of the arena community will agree upon.
Mm-hmm.
That the idea of buckets, the theory behind it, is fantastic, right? That is fantastic. And when it came out, like as soon as that video of them previewing it came out in March of 2018, I remember both of us were like, "Wow, this idea is good," but we were both weary. It's like, "Whoa, you're taking a lot of work here, right?"
Yeah.
Like this is.
I was very surprised when it came out. I was like,
Yeah.
this is kind of the system that's very similar to one that I proposed. And when I proposed it, I said, there's no way Blizzard's going to do that. It's way too much work. And they kind of suck at doing things in the arena. So why would they do that, right? And then they went ahead and did it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe. This is also around the time when Chalky got hired. I was like, I don't know. Maybe they like felt more confident about this stuff and they're going to roll with it. And then between like the missed buckets and just the slowness of everything moving, and then they put algorithms in, and then they decided they weren't even gonna like bucket for how good cards are, but rather just like how average players would pick cards. And you kind of like the bucket system had lost its way.
Yeah, so if we want to look at the implementation of the bucket system, it's gone from atrociously bad to decent. Like it's all spanned between there, you know. It's never been amazing. It's been like, oh, okay, this is like, you know, overall acceptable to WTF levels. And I think that's a good summary, right? It's always just been sort of like between those two. Sometimes you're at the WTF. Sometimes, at best, you're at the, well, you know, they didn't screw up that much. This is acceptable. We can work with this. And that's kind of it. What I wanted to do was, and so before I talk about this, I want to specify that anything, any criticisms I put out, it's not directed towards Ixar. I'm going to direct this towards Blizzard overall.
Well, Team 5.
Yeah, or Team 5, because I don't know how things work there,
Yeah.
right? So and because whenever I have criticized before, people are just like, dude, Ixar is like, you know, he's working hard. I don't know how it works. Ixar, you know, made this comment.
Like it's just the dev team, right? Like at some point, some part of the dev team or some mix of the dev team is responsible for this, right? So, the buck probably doesn't stop with Ixar like fully, but he's pretty high up, and you know, this is going to be Team 5.
So here, and this is the reason I want to read out the comment that was made as well, because I really did not like how this was worded. Because here's the thing. Okay, I'll focus on this part. For players new or inexperienced with Hearthstone, the idea of having obvious choices is a win. That's true. Sure. Yeah, of course. Like for new players, you want to see the Fireball, Wisp, and Murloc Tidehunter. You're like, oh, cool, Fireball. For hardcore players, if the change to buckets is not a clear upside, quote, or open parentheses, which has been most of the feedback we've received here, close parentheses, then it's probably just not worth doing. When I read that, I was like, oh, come on, Blizzard.
What? You don't agree?
That's cheap. No, because here's the thing. There's nothing in here which points any of the sort of blame at themselves.
Oh, the responsibility? You mean they're not taking responsibility for how they sucked at bucketing? Which is the reason bucketing failed?
From that sentence, it's like, okay, so you hardcore players, buckets were not well received by you. So it's just not worth doing. It's like, no. Hold up a second. Like, whoa. This is like such a twisted categorization.
No. I mean, look, we should obviously stop using cars because the drivers that we have appointed are bad and people complain about them. That's that's a decent result, right? Like otherwise you'd have bad drivers and cars. Of course, the solution is to have good drivers and cars, right? And to keep developing the cars and the drivers. But assuming you're not going to do that, which Blizzard has had like a year and a half to do and did not do all that much, then yeah, get rid of the drivers, right? Get rid of the cars. What's the point? Like I know they're trying to make it and make it seem like cars are terrible technology or it wasn't a good fit for their situation. But I don't know. I don't know what you were expecting. Like we tried to bucket the arena, but we suck at it, and no one was happy because we sucked at it. And because we sucked at it, we are going to stop doing it because we also believe that we will continue sucking at it in the future, and so this will not be good for anyone. You expect them to say that?
Here's the thing, like the thing I hate about it so much is I think it's fair to say that a decent number of times their bucketing was mind-bogglingly bad. Like we just don't understand, right? For example, Wrapped Golem, when it was first bucketed, it was in the 5th bucket, even though the most comparable card, Obsidian, like you had like an apples to apples comparison, basically. You had a neutral Obsidian Destroyer, which is better than Obsidian Destroyer, and you had an Obsidian Destroyer, but you bucketed the class one second and the neutral one 5th. It wasn't even just a 1 bucket difference, it was a 5 bucket difference. You were dealing with the same cards at the same time, and
Yeah.
yet there is that difference.
I mean that 3/2 mummy person that's like the power creep on Scarlet Crusader was bucketed below Scarlet Crusader. Yep. Like yeah, like I mean, look, no one's gonna disagree with you, and I think we all know that bucketing was horrible in terms of how they actually bucketed. And like, so is your main thing that they're not owning up to their role in why bucketing didn't work out?
Here's the thing. Well, so that's part of it, right? And the thing is, it's just like they came out with this big idea, this grand idea, pretty good. The implementation has been not great, and yeah, now that they're getting rid of it, it's just like, yeah, it's because the feedback we've gotten sucks. It's like you guys just don't like it. It's not an upside.
It's a fact. People didn't like it. The feedback was probably negative. Like if you put a crazy driver in a car, I would have a crappy experience in the car and give negative feedback on the car and the driver. I may make comments like the car could probably be good if you got a better driver, but you know, when taken as a whole, because the car requires a driver and they are in charge of the car and the driver, you know, it was just a bad system. Like nothing Ixar said was wrong. It's just, I think you're just expecting them to do something that it takes a big man and a big development team to do what you want them to do, and from how Blizzard's related to the arena community in the last 5 years, Blizzard's not the bigger man ever.
Nope.
So I don't know why you would even have a sliver of expectation for anything like that to happen. Like, sure, it could have been more like egalitarian, like say like, oh, it's an unfortunate thing that, you know, it didn't work out, rather than lay the blame on the player feedback. But I don't know. I'm not like offended or anything about it. I think it's just Team 5 being Team 5. And we all know the real reasons for it, and some of which were the ones Ixar mentioned. But the cause of the things that Ixar mentioned, we also know, having played in the arena before and talked to people who play in the arena before. So I don't know. I just don't see. It's not a big deal to me that they didn't like fess up to how badly they handled everything.
Yeah, I think the difference between this is just like you are so jaded. Like you're just like, oh yeah, of course. Like this is just them. This is just how they are. And I'm not saying I'm like not jaded, but this is stuff that I do kind of take personally. It's just like, hey, this sucks. You guys need to change this. This is embarrassing. Like, please do better. And they're like, oh, it's like, due to your feedback and how you guys like don't like this, and how, you know, this is not a clear upside. Yeah, well, you know, we're just gonna get rid of it. It's like, wow, come on, man, are you serious? Like, we basically call out Blizzard for saying this is poorly implemented, and I don't think our standard or the community standard is that high.
It's not.
You know, like whenever, all right, so whenever they do like some good bucketing where it's like, this is acceptable. We think it's a first bucket, but they put it in the third bucket, we're just like, I can kind of see it. You know
By the
what?
way,
Like,
there's
let's
totally
play
a
with it.
7 buckets. If we think it's in the first and they put it in the third, they have like a 50% chance of getting in that range by like
Yes.
having a monkey throw a dart to the wall.
Yeah.
And whenever they do something like that, we're like, oh, that's decent, you know?
So you can see us like giving them credits, like, okay, this is fine, that's fine. You know what? It's not where we would put it, but that's fine. But there were a lot of times like we kind of have to call them out on. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. If you just think about it for a few minutes, it doesn't make sense. And due to like for a long time, so this recent rebucketing, they moved some of the cards by a lot, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But their previous philosophy was we only move it by like a half bucket, maybe a bucket at most, or we just don't do anything about it, which caused the eccentric scribe, like Hogsteed meta for 2 months. It was just scribes and Hogsteeds all over the place. So um, them having that and then coming back at us.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I hear that you're feeling hurt about
I'm done with that.
but I don't know. Like I remember last year around this time, I tried to help Ixar, and when it came to the bucketing, just in public, when they were like, "Oh, we use these rates. If it falls below this line, we potentially move it down a bucket, right? If it goes above this line, we move it up a bucket." And I'm like, those numbers aren't mathematically linked. Like, you need these two numbers instead, or like some ratio that controls the same ratio. Because you just, they just use numbers that they like, that they were not like based on anything, right? And they weren't connected. It weren't even relatively correct. And so I corrected it, and Ixar's response publicly was literally like, "Are you joking? Like, is this some joke that I'm missing? Like, are you really saying that to me or to our team? Like, who are you? What are you like? What are you saying? That we did this wrong, or that there is a right answer even? Like, I don't know." And after people were like, "Yeah, I think Godwick is being serious, and this is why. Here's some math that he didn't like fully spell out, but like just kind of alluded to because he thought that you guys who are doing this will know at least some of the basic math." Ixar got a little quiet. So I don't know if they ever, used a relatively correct math on the bucketing thing. They stopped talking about it. But that's the kind of attitude that, from what the public sees of Team 5, it has when it comes to stuff like bucketing. So if that's the standard, if that's the basis from which Blizzard and Team 5 is doing bucketing, it's not that they're never going to get it right or anything, but like, yeah, quit while you're behind, right? Like this is that's an overall likelihood of it happening, which is why I wasn't surprised. I've been watching bucketing die. Like I was very excited about bucketing when it first came out. You listen to the Lightforge. We have all of our positions public, and I was very excited about bucketing until that point when I was like, oh god, they're just not going to get it. And so it's like, yeah, it sucks if your like dad dies, but if your dad has like cancer for a year in a different country and you were like, estranged from him, I don't know. It's still sad, but it's like less sad. You're more jaded about it. And then when they pull the plug, you're like, yeah, okay. I mean, he wasn't functional for a while. I don't know. Maybe I just have no heart. But I really don't think it just doesn't. I have no like emotional reaction to this. It was kind of like a shrug. Arena's going to be worse in the drafting and probably better in the playing. Because ultimately, bucketing did not make a better playing experience at the top, right? Because Blizzard bucketed it poorly, but it did make a better drafting experience, even when there's missed buckets. So there's gonna be less card diversity and more able to do things at the top, right? You're not gonna get a scribe meta again because scribe won't be misbucketed.
Okay.
Okay, so let me. I kind of want to run down, like, let's say you're in Blizzard's position, right? Over the past year, I've been working on a dev team for another TCG, Gods Unchained, and so a lot of it involves working for the team and whatever. And they've been teaching me how to like do like general development work, right, and design work, not just like valuing cards, right, or like strategies in card games, which is what I'm good at, or like how card games are like done. Instead, it's basic stuff about like the very basics of game design and how to run a game, and things like that, right? That we don't usually like. We weren't game designers. So you got to evaluate, right, whether a system is worth it. And that's what, like, reading Ixar's post, I can see the thought process, right? Like, why are we doing this? Let's start there, right? Like, is it doing what it's supposed to do, right? Step one. And the answer is always no. Buckets never did what it was supposed to do. They never got there. So you had a system, right, that we were talking about before that never did what it's supposed to do. Do people like it? Casual players were like kind of ambivalent about it. They missed the easy wins, but you, in theory, got them better decks in the end. But that only assumes you bucketed correctly. So if you didn't bucket correctly, you didn't even get that advantage. And so you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, not a win for new players. What about experienced players? We keep getting negative feedback from experienced players that say we suck at bucketing, right? Whenever you start bucketing, you put a target on your back. You're saying, I think this card is this good, right? And you can see that they tried, they failed, and then they stopped saying it. Sometime in spring, or like the end of winter, they very explicitly said, we are not bucketing based on what we think the best cards are. We're not even bucketing based on what the data says the best cards are. We're bucketing based on what people pick, what average players pick. So at that point, the entire theory of buckets went off rails. So at that point, buckets, when you're asking, do pro players like buckets? Like, of course they don't, because it's not serving pro players. It's explicitly meant to serve from that point. I made a huge deal out of it. Like, I made a ridiculously huge deal when they finally announced it. And I don't think I got a lot of support on that, which was odd to me. I think a lot of people were on the firm other side of it, and I was like, all right, whatever, you guys will come around. This thing will just play out. And it's played out now. Like, if you go back and listen to the Lightforge, you'll hear a lot of very prescient thoughts on how bucketing will go from me.
You've never had faith in them.
No. I mean, because they have, like, why would you have faith in someone, right? Like, they have history, or you don't know. They're a known quantity that's been failing the whole time, right? They haven't made any changes on top of that. Like, well, and on top of that, it got real bad. I became 100% sure of this and lost 100% hope when they announced wild rotations. Because, like, imagine if you sucked at, like, shooting free throws. And then all of a sudden you're like, nah, screw it, I'm going to start shooting half-court shots. Screw free throws. That's just not our thing. We're going to start shooting half-court shots. And you're like, well, how many half-court shots are you going to make? I don't know. I guess in theory, there is this person that just sucks at free throws but could chuck half-court shots pretty damn well. But a betting man's not going to take that bet at that point, right? Regardless of what the history was before that. And we had a lot of history supporting, like, that they're just kind of not good at basketball, or at least not good at shooting shots, right? Like, we'll call shooting shots arena evaluation.
This analogy, let's stick with these and not the year-long dying cancer like analogies. Let's just stick with these.
They're all the same. I don't know why people get worked up about analogies. It's just like X's and Y's and numbers, right?
Shooting half-court shots is just like watching your dad slowly die, like, halfway around the world from cancer.
Yeah, that's how symbolic logic works. And that's what logic is. So, assuming we're having a logical discussion, that's all the same. The analogy works or it doesn't, right? Regardless of what the subject matter is. Anyway, so it's not doing what it's supposed to do. People don't really like it, right? Part of the community it was meant to serve, it had stopped serving quite explicitly. They had gone the other way because they realized they couldn't serve the pro community. Why can't they serve the pro community? Because they weren't good enough at doing this. This was a task when they took on. We had a question mark of how good they were going to be on it, and, like, if they weren't going to be good immediately, you know, if they can learn or, like, hire people. And they've proven that they have not hired anyone who was able to do this, or they have not, like, listened to that person or persons. They got somewhat better at it, but they didn't get better enough, right? And it's been enough of a time. So they're just not going to be good at this thing, right? They're just not going to be good at shooting. What do you do if you're a basketball player? You have to play basketball. That's your job. And you're bad at shooting. You try to develop a game plan that does not involve shooting, right? That seems really, really basic, but and really, if you were like us, right? We're not in the game. We're like observers of it, and we, like, you know, maybe make side bets and stuff like that. And we analyze, and we're like, this player sucks at shooting. He's got bad form. He's probably never going to be good at shooting. We're rooting for you. But because we
care about the team.
We care about the team. Yeah, we want the team to win. And if you shot well, the team will do a lot better. But you're not. And then at a certain point, the guy starts just chucking half-court shots, and you're like, what the hell? So we've just given up on this trying to make shots thing, and we're gonna focus on doing spectacular things for, like, crowd-pleasing moments. Okay, well, that's not going to be good for the bottom line of how many games we win. And now they've come out and they're like, all right, we got a new game plan. This player right here, he's going to stop taking shots altogether. He's going to set some screens, grab some layups, grab some rebounds, make some layups, right? We're gonna focus on that. And that's not a bad plan, right? Like, why try to train the guy who can't shoot free throws to shoot free throws? Like, yeah, you should, but at a certain point, you just give up. Like, and that's what it is. Like, Blizzard wasn't good enough at this. They weren't fast enough at this. Their system didn't work together with it. The system stopped doing what it was supposed to do. People didn't like it. Like, you don't keep going down this road. You ditch it. You try to do something better later. I mean, in theory, you create the better thing and you replace this with that rather than just like saying, we're going to get rid of buckets. Who knows if we have anything else to it? We're just going to do micro adjust now and that's it for a while. But it's not like my point is that if you think about it, if you disconnect yourself emotionally from this thing, right? We care a lot about the arena, we play the arena, whatever, and you just look at it from Blizzard's perspective, like they're doing the logical decision, right? They may have been very, very slow in coming here to getting to this point. I don't know what they were trying internally, and maybe they had great ideas and it had a good shot of working, and it just ended up not working. Maybe they were just super unrealistic. Maybe there was some turnover or whatever, right? Like, who knows? But right now, at this point, they had two ways to go, right? They can literally go out there and hire someone from the arena community, because at this point, I think we're the only ones that can do a decent job of it. We being members of the arena community, not just like me and Merps. And like that, have that be like most of their job, and then have the other part be balancing. Maybe they wanted to do it. Maybe that's kind of a weird, small, niche role that just didn't fit into what Blizzard does as a company, right? Or you can just get rid of buckets, figure out something new. Like, it's not like other games are all doing buckets, right? There's no like expectation of buckets. Like, why are we if I was Team 5, I would be thinking, we don't have the expertise for it. Why are we the ones who are putting ourselves out like that and failing? Like, why? And so they had some meetings, they came out, and they're like, we're going to stop doing this. And this is not the end, guys. This is not the end. I firmly believe that Blizzard will come up with other things to make the arena better from a balance perspective and from an overall fun perspective. And getting rid of buckets, which is something that most pro players like if it were implemented correctly, it's something that had to be done if they weren't willing to go out and hire someone who could actually do buckets.
All right. So I want to address two things. And the first one is, I think, a huge systemic barrier to us getting what we want and also the game getting better, which is, if you look at just the entire history of the arena community's communication to Blizzard, and also just kind of like the Hearthstone community's communication with Blizzard in general, some games view criticisms as motivation. They view it as like, oh, hey, we're all part of the same team. Because people that complain about a game play the game, and they want to keep playing the game. They're just unhappy with something else. But all of our goals are aligned. We, the dev team, want to make the game better because, this pays the bills. This is our project. We love it. And the players, they love what we created, and they also want to further this game. For some reason, and we see this with like something like Overwatch, right? I keep on comparing it to that because it's like right next door. And that is a perfect example of like devs working harmoniously with the player team.
I mean, not a news flash. Overwatch is managed better than Hearthstone's arena game mode.
And that's fine. And I understand it's a completely different game, but I use the dev / community thing as a huge example of what it could be. And over here, I think it's fair to say, and especially our relationship, and by relationship, I mean how Blizzard views us, they view the community antagonistically, especially us. And this is true, like where they will look at criticisms as an attack on their way of doing things. Well, and I find it so mind-boggling just because it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if you don't like how we phrase things, if you don't like us and like and how we do things or whatever, there's a reason that people post like theses like Tarot does. There's a reason that people like us do this podcast, like stay up at night to create these scores. It's because we care. It's because we like the game. And when we criticize, we're not trying to tear down the game. We're trying to communicate that, hey, this game can be so much better. And systemically, it's like, I understand we're doing an experiment, not necessarily getting rid of buckets, but it's like instance after instance, I feel like we are always getting blamed. I'm just like, it's like, oh, you guys are criticizing this too much. You guys hate it, so we're taking it away. I'm just like,
well,
really?
what's their other option? They can't make it better. They tried. Like, do you think that Blizzard did not try to make the bucket system work after a year and a half in the bucket system?
I think if you call a try a real, like, they tried, right? They quote tried.
Nah, I come at it from a totally different view then. I think they tried, like really tried, and I think they sucked that much. You think they just didn't try that hard, and they were probably not as bad at doing it as, like,
Here's the thing. I think part of quote try is also identifying someone competent enough to do it. And
okay, but like, I mean, if your one solution is to like go out and like hire like Tachi, right, to like run it, I'm just spitballing like a name out there, right? Like, if that's your like one solution, that's not necessarily something the dev team has control over.
You don't
that's
even
not
need
even
Tachi. You don't even need a top arena player, right? All you need is someone who, when you look at Wrapped Golem, think, hey, we actually have a card that's pretty close to this. Where is that bucket? And not just like, oh, hey, it's kind of a big thing. 5th seems good. Did I put any more thought into it? No, because if they did put extra thought into it,
but if they hire that
they just
guy,
don't understand the game.
It's still a bunch of money. It's like a permanent person. It's Blizzard. They don't just fire people like once their roles are like, I mean, they didn't used to. Maybe they do now after last year. But normally they're like, they're a company that like sticks with their people, especially their developers, and this person would be in a developer role. And so you got to think like you got to hire someone, and then they're part of the team forever, and they have to have like a role, right? Even if they move on from arena to it, like there's a whole lot of things in it. I think you're simplifying like how easy it would be for Blizzard to make this hire, right? And I agree. It doesn't have to be someone at the top caliber level. It could be someone a few steps down from that would still get bucketing, like mostly right. But I don't know. If you were on the dev team, if you were XR, you would have to write this up into a pitch. You would have to send this up. It would have to be approved by Team 5's like head or whatever. They'd have to send it up probably to Blizzard. Blizzard would have to like it's a whole thing. And yeah, I agree. They didn't try that hard. If you need to go down that route to try hard, but they didn't try to get more resources. Let's put it that way, or at least if they got more resources, they got the wrong ones. But I think they tried with whatever amount of like resources that they were willing to put in the arena to put those resources to work, and now they're cutting back on the amount of resources they need to make their version of arena function, and it'll never be without buckets and without any new thing on top of it, with just micro adjust, it will never be as good as a competent bucketing system. Not even a good bucketing system, just a competent one, right? It will never be as good. I think almost all the top players and people who know the arena will agree with that statement. But if they just didn't have the resources and couldn't get the resources, or didn't want to spend their political points to get the resources, like think of Blizzard as like, I don't know, a giant clique, right? Like there's a reason they feel like hurt whenever like people criticize them. It's because that's how, as an organization, like they're generally built. And the different branches of Blizzard do things differently, but I guess Hearthstone may be especially on that emotional side, especially because it's like it's a house Ben Brode built, right? What is Ben Brode? Ben Brode is all about how do you feel as a player, right? which probably tells me that his emotions are kind of important to him and the emotions of people around him. And the philosophy and the office, right, of Team 5 probably takes from that, even though Ben Brode's gone. Like, this is not... Like, I don't think this is like, this is why I saw it happening a year ago, right? This is why I saw it really happening very, very, very quickly while rotations are coming out. It's because when you put all the math, like when you put all the things together and you set them on their course, they will inevitably come out one way. And when the pieces got more and more clear, and their the alternate routes start getting closed down, this was where it was going to head. And they got here now, but I don't know. I think it's a bunch of people making quite arguably reasonable decisions that just ended up being crappy when taken as a whole. So, question about moving forward. At this point, if you were in Ixar's shoes, would you spend a ton of political capital to hire someone who knows the arena, if not a top player or whatever, and is otherwise probably going to contribute some stuff to your balance team? Or do you scrap it, use your current resources, and try to do something else, a number of months from now to make the arena more fun?
Here's the question. Here's the one thing I'm wondering, because it seems from my perspective, like with the buckets, there was not that much work put into it. Or the work that they put into it was really low. Like, there doesn't seem to have been quality control. And I have no idea. I can't look inside of there. Yeah, maybe they had...
We're just going to say everything you think is true, right? But now you're talking about your Ixar. The people that have been doing low-quality work are your employees. They're not getting fired. They're also your friends.
So the thing is, if I move on from buckets and I do Project X, right, to improve the arena, if Project X has the same effort that I see being put into buckets, that doesn't matter. Nothing matters then. Like, here's the thing. Like, nothing freaking matters then, because... No. I'm getting really, really, like sad here, because, okay, Hearthstone is a 5-year-old game. It's a 5-year-old game where we've been talking about tournament mode. That hasn't happened. What has happened? Tavern Brawls. That's it. Like, really, if you look at it, it's like Tavern Brawls. That is really a lot
of single-player content.
Single-player content, sure. But in 5 years, I think it's fair to say more things should have happened. And a lot of things that were supposed to happen is just like, oh, wait for new and exciting things. That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, okay, but none of that is Ixar's problem. He's not. He has no say over any of that.
Right. And I want to say that this is towards Blizzard as a whole, right? This is towards Blizzard as a whole. If I'm in Ixar's shoes, though, sure, the amount of productivity, the amount of work I've gotten out of the bucket system sucks. So if this is all I can get, if literally this is all I can get, then I do have to move on from buckets. I agree with that.
Personnel.
But it's your personnel, sure. But here's the question. I can't think of anything that would succeed this Project X, this future Project X. I literally can't think of anything that would succeed with the quality of work that I've seen put into buckets. I really can't. So in my mind, it doesn't even matter what this next project is. It's like, if it's just going to have the same output, it doesn't matter. Just take your hands off Arena then. It'll be less infuriating that way.
Okay, so I'm going to get to where you are, but I'm going to bring it back to the cars first, okay? Because someone in the Twitch chat wants me to bring it back to the cars analogy, so I will. So we got these drivers, they suck at driving. We got these cars that seem like pretty good technology. Everyone's excited about the technology, but when you put the cars with the drivers, bad things happen. There's a lot of crashes, nothing gets there on time. It's a pretty bad experience for everyone who tries to use it. You're in charge of dealing with cars and drivers. You can't fire the drivers. So you look at the drivers, you look at their resumes, you talk with them, you figure out what they do, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out maybe a lot of the drivers are really good novelists. They write good stories, they're good at grammar. They're not so good at driving with the whole hand-eye coordination things and like being on time, and like that's not their thing. Paying attention to the road. So you scrap the car program. Like maybe the cars were fine, maybe they weren't the problem. You don't know. You just know that this car program is not going anywhere. Maybe now instead of trying to drive people around, right? You just write them really good stories so they don't have to get anywhere. So they can just be satisfied sitting where they are and reading good stories. Now, I think that's what Blizzard's doing. I've thought that's what Blizzard's doing since the announcement of the wall rotations. In this analogy, getting to places is actually balancing the arena and having a good experience for top arena players in a competitive mindset. And listening to pretty stories is the equivalent of turning arena into a weird version of Tavern Brawl. And step one, they announced that the bucket system was no longer going to serve win rates. They're going to serve average player pick rates. Like at that point, I didn't care about the bucketing system anymore, because who cares if they get it right or wrong, right? Like if they get it right, average players are all wrong, right? Like on too many things, that if they get it exactly right to do exactly what they want to do, I would hate the bucketing results. So at that point, I don't care if they get it right or not, right? Like, you know, like when Rap Golem came out, I was like, oh god, fifth bucket? Like that was a fun thing, but it was not like seriously impacting how I judge the arena, because if it wasn't going to be in the fifth bucket and then no one picked it, it was going to end up back going down to the fifth bucket. Then they did wall rotations, which strains their already strained resources, right? They couldn't balance things with 4 months. Now they're gonna, and 130 cards. Now they're going to swap around like most of their set every time, right? With the new cards, and they have to get a balance like within 2 months, probably within 1 month to have any amount of meta. That wasn't going to happen, right? Like the realistic people among us knew I was right. The realistic people among us were also a shockingly small percentage. I feel like this should be the episode where I just kind of look back at the last year and was like, I told you so, told you so, told you so. Every single time I said anything about the future of the arena and what was going to be good for serious arena players and what was going to be bad, it has all led up to this point in which it's all been announced to have been coming true, and or the last 5 months you've seen it with your own eyes. And I don't think that they're wrong in doing that. Right? Like, if your drivers are just better novelists, stop running a Uber service. Like, stop trying to get people to places. Our problem is that we're people who want to get to places. Right? That's why we're playing the arena. And they've stopped serving us. But we're the minority. No, I think every one of us in the arena community will admit we are the minority who cares so much about a limited game mode. In a game super seriously, and they've been moving away from servicing us since 2019 began. Everything they've done since then is moving away towards serving serious arena players. Literally every single thing they did in the arena. Like, this is not taking buckets away. I don't even think that services us less. Merps is like, oh, but any system you replace it with is not going to be any better. Caveat, it's not going to be any better for us. It's not going to be any better for serious arena players. Now, yes, it is part of Ixar's job description to care about serious players. He's the lead producer, balanced guy person, right? Like, that's his job. But if he instead makes the other 90% of people significantly happier, I don't think his boss is going to care.
Oh, God.
Like, I think it's going to net out to be a win for Ixar, a win for Team 5, and a win for Blizzard. And I'm not just talking about money, right? Like, a lot of, like, whenever I say stuff like this, people are like, oh, because the arena doesn't make money and they care about money. Take the money away and just look at, like, because remember, this is the house that Brode built. This is the house of emotions. This is the people with like thin ass skins that like can't take any amount of criticism. Right? Like I remember every single time that I like made a substantive point, Ben Brode responds to me personally and was like, ignoring your serious like substantive point, you need to stop speaking like that. Here is a lesson in etiquette. That's the house that Brode built, right? That's what matters. Like, the way that you say something is much more important than the substance. Well, a lot of people are like that. Not just people at Team 5. A lot of people playing Hearthstone is like that. There's pretty pictures, there's great animations. Like, one of the reasons that we play this game instead of another game is because it has a lot of really high production values, right? It's fun to play, even if the mechanics are all crap and the game is not balanced. It's still got that innate, like, like giddy, like if you're looking at like Timmy, Jimmy, and Spike, right? It's a Timmy game at the core of it. Hearthstone. It's really not a Spike game. It's somewhat of a Jimmy game, but it's really a Timmy game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Timmy's the guy that's like, "Ooh, shiny things, big things." Jimmy's the one that's like, "I want to explore everything and like figure stuff out." And Spike is the one that's like, "I want to win." So
that's Adulta.
No, what? I'm a Jimmy. I'm more of a Jimmy than a Spike. I just happen to win a lot, right? Like, you guys know how I feel about misplays.
Okay.
You guys know how I feel about misplays. A Spike would not be like, "Oh yeah, misplays are okay." They would be like, "No, misplays are terrible." It's just if you're good enough of a Jimmy, you can beat Spikes at their own game. That's my sincere philosophy. And that's not what Blizzard serves for the most part, right? Blizzard serves Timmys more than anything else with Hearthstone. They tried, right? Merps, you keep saying they didn't try. I think they tried. I think 2018 they really tried with whatever resources they had. They didn't go out and get like a new good resource, right? They didn't go out and get like a driving instructor to like, make sure their Uber fleets don't crash and get to places on time. They didn't do that. They didn't get someone who was like, "Hey, you got to do things on time." They didn't get that. But they took whatever resources they had on hand and they tried to make the car service work. And when it didn't work, they tried to make the car service do something that's with the main goal of not getting people around, but rather with the main goal of keeping people entertained while they're being driven around aimlessly, slowly, and crashing into things. And then we're at the logical progression now, where they're like, "Why are we in cars at all? This is not what we do. This is not what we're good at, right? Like, unless you're going to give me a whole different set of people to work with, which is not going to happen, and I don't want that to happen, we're just going to do what we're good at, right? And what they're good at is not balancing the arena. That's clearly not what they're good at."
Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. That's it.
Yeah. Sucks for us. Sucks for you, probably, if you're listening to the Lightforge podcast.
I mean, right now on the screen we have RIP buckets, but really what it is RIP effort.
Yeah. RIP competitive arena, support. But it's also not news. I go back to the dying dad with cancer. We got the diagnosis like a year ago. We saw the impact of the disease, starting the beginning of the year, and it's still sad. It's always sad to lose your dad, but you can't say you didn't see it coming. You can't say you weren't warned, and you can't say you could have done something to stop it. None of those are true.
Okay.
RIP buckets.
All right, great.
Anything else you want to add before we move on to?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
Lesson learned, Blizzard. Ixar, did you hear? You killed my dad with cancer. Seriously, if my dad gets diagnosed with cancer in the next month, I'm going to be real sad. Okay, so we got one more topic to cover today. But first, the Lightforge Podcast and all analogies relating to cars, to shooting free throws, and to your dad getting cancer is brought to you by our Patreons. You didn't know you were supporting this, but you are. Patreon.com/grinandgoat. Who are our top patrons for the month, Merps?
Thank you for supporting Adult's Analogies. 4P, Afro Ninja TB, Brand New, Cheng Yin, Joshua C, Eric L, RV Night Train. Thank you for this. Yes.
Thank you guys. You guys keep the light on in the Lightforge so we can make these analogies. But seriously, guys, just love all the patrons because it's such like it's like the most low-key way to support us with the highest impact, because more money comes to us than like a Twitch sub or than something else. But and it happens every month, and it really means a lot to us to have this support. Okay, we're gonna end this with something that's actually relevant to the meta that you're playing with right now. Because remember, buckets are leaving, but not anytime really soon. It's in a number of unspecified weeks whenever Blizzard makes the update. If you're looking at history, the last time Blizzard made a big update was at the end of September, and like for last year, that's when like giggling got nerfed and like stuff was like happening with that. So the big patch, if I were a betting man, I'd actually bet that that's going to be at the end of September ish. So we're going to be in this meta for a while, and that's also around when the rotation happens. It kind of all just makes sense in my eyes, anyway. But yeah, we're going to have buckets. The buckets have been rebucketed once already. It may be rebucketed again. Micro adjusts are going to come in at some point in like a week, maybe 2 weeks. Who knows how fast Blizzard is with that? And we're going to get data and like information about the buckets probably next week. And we'll update the tier list with that. But just remember, you can be all sad all you want about this, but you saw it coming. I told you it was coming. It came. Like, yeah. And you're going to have to stay in this meta with the buckets for another month and a half, I think. So, the most important card in the Saviors of Uldam meta is not Rap Golem. Not because it was moved the bucket to be really high, but because Rap Golem's a rare card, right? And rare cards just aren't seen enough. It's not your other high value cards either, because they're all rare cards too, and epic cards. The card that makes the most impact right now, the common card that's rated the second highest. The highest rated common card's a Picrocolis, which like we see everywhere in the meta too. But
there's also Candle Taker.
Oh, that's right. My bad. There's Candle Taker, but there's nothing to talk about with Candle Taker. It's just an on-curve minion. Bug Collector is also really high. Okay, drop my point. There's quite a number of cards higher than this one on the tier list.
Your build-up is not working, man.
But yeah, they're all very important. Like you should know what to do. Like you should know what to do with the Bug Collector, and you should know what to do with the Candle Taker. You should definitely know what to do with the Picrocolis because that's such a huge swing. But the thing that warps the entire meta is the one in the middle. It is Bone Wraith at 113, the number one highest rated 4 mana card in the entire game, including legendaries for neutral.
4-drops suck.
Yeah. Shroom is a 112. Shroom got close. Dark Iron's a 111. Fireplume's a 111. They get close.
They're all basically the same.
They're all basically the same,
like,
yeah.
They're all basically the same in there. But I think Bone Wraith is a really interesting card. So Bone Wraith, if you guys don't know, 4 mana, 2/5 with Taunt and Reborn. This is a great example of a card that the power level is decent, but its impact on the meta is huge. And it's because Bone Wraith, what it really does is it increases the board tension. It prolongs the game, not just by being a taunt. It's like a really annoying taunt that kind of necessarily will force opponents, or if played on the other side, will force you to slow down the game. It's not advantageous for you to attack into that first body, and it'll create this very this board full of tension that you put minions, you don't attack, they put minions, and they might attack, they might not attack because you have a Bone Wraith on your side, and then it just like creates these really complicated boards, which is kind of cool in a way, but it definitely prolongs the game in a way that I think the most extreme example is Giggling Inventor for 5 mana. Back when that was in the meta, I mean, that was the ultimate example of board tension. Someone puts down Giggling Inventor, they're not getting through for 2 turns probably. So, I think that...
And a Giggling Inventor is 4 hits for 7 mana right now. Back then, 4 hits for 5 mana. This one's basically 3 hits for 4 mana. Like, you're rarely going to be able to take it out in 1 hit.
Yeah, I agree. So it's got like a similar kind of effect to Giggling Inventor, while not being nearly as powerful as 5 mana Giggling Inventor. So that's why I think it's pretty important to always keep this in mind. And when Bone Wraith comes down, the first question you really have to ask is it worth it to hit it this turn? Because You'll find that a lot of the time the answer is no. You're just not equipped to deal with it that well. So what you have to do is ask that question first. Is it advantageous for me to hit it with the creatures I have on the board this turn? And also, I would not rush to get rid of the Bone Wraith using a spell, like a premium spell there. That's just not worth your time. Do the risk assessment, put out your other minions so that you can get initiative with them next turn. Think about what your opponents can do, and then deal with the Bone Wraith. So like I said, the power level of it isn't necessarily that high, but it does force you to really do a proper risk assessment and to really think about it. Once again, don't use, well, there's always situational differences, but I would advise against using premium spells and removals on this thing because if you're doing that, you're giving your opponents a ton of credit for a card that's rated a 113.
Yep. That's the problem. It's a 2/5 taunt. What resources are you really going to spend to kill it? Right? Any resource you spend to kill it that's not something on the board that's not getting hurt a lot is bad. So you generally wait until your board is good enough and then you take care of it, and that creates that board tension because now your opponent has initiative. It causes more swings in the game than a lot of the cards that look like they're like designed to cause huge swings just by allowing your opponent to get back on the board when they're not on the board. Or if your opponent is on the board, or if you're on the board, you put one of these out and you can go face and do whatever the hell you want and you feel pretty protected. Yeah, it's a game changer. I don't know, like what would you, so you mentioned that it's not like always correct. In fact, it's usually not correct to hit into it if you can't kill it on that turn, or if you can kill it, it may not even be, because you got to think of it not as like a 2/5 with a 2/1 body, but as kind of like a 2/8 taunt, like something along those lines. So if you just keep hitting into it, it'll actually be able to take out one of your minions, and then once it trades 1-for-1 and has that taunt and all those hits, it's getting ridiculous value. So the way to get value is to not do that, but when you don't do that, you give your opponent initiative. What do you do when?
What do you do when?
What do you do when?
What are you asking me?
What do you do when? Like, their opponent played a Bone Wraith. Like, usually you don't hit in, but sometimes you hit in. If you don't get rid of it quick enough, they may have 2 or 3 turns of initiative, right? So what do you do when?
Okay. I don't really know what I will answer. Okay. So your opponent puts down a Bone Wraith. I don't understand what you're asking. Okay, really, this is. I'm not. I'm trying to.
Okay,
get there,
think
dude.
of some situations with Bone Wraith. What would you do?
Oh, what? They just put down a Bone Wraith?
Yeah, there's like something else on the board. Let's say like they have a 4/2 on the board, and they put down a Bone Wraith. They attack your face with a 4/2. You have a 2/4 on the board, or like a 3/4 on the board. What do you do?
Oh, yeah. All you do is you go into your normal risk assessment turn. That's basically it. Which seems simple enough, but I think for a lot of people, they take that part, the Bone Wraith part of it out. So they're like, oh, I have a 3/4. They put down a 2/5. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna start hitting into it. Of course I will. And they take that out of their turn planning as well. So this is why immediately I just tell people like, yeah, dude, don't assume anything. Don't assume that like, well, I have to start chunking it down anyways. Might as well do it this turn. So just lump that into all of your decision making process, and then you go into the, oh well, let's say it's 6 mana. Well, do I drop the Boulderfist Ogre, or do I drop the double 3-drops, which is more advantageous? I'm going into their turn 7. What can I expect during their turn 7? So for me, and in my thought process, it's nothing fancy. It's just let's like loop that into the whole entire decision making tree rather than looking at the Bone Wraith separately, which I see a lot of people do. I see my opponents, it's like when their turn starts, immediately whatever thing that they have available, they're like, okay, attack. I'm just going to start wearing it down. All right, how does my turn begin? So just don't do that. Don't do what my opponents do.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best advice and the only advice you can get with Bone Wraith. It's a hard card to play around, and it's not that hard to use effectively. So I can't decide if that's good design or bad design, but it's definitely powerful. Um, and if it forces us to think this much on stuff, right, it's got to be doing something right. But it also causes way too much swings. So that's the balance. Okay. That's it for Car Good Bad. Car Good Bad, Bone Wraith, 113. We're not changing the score of it or anything. Like, we don't think like it's better than we thought it was or anything. It's just you got to think a lot more on it than we gave it credit for in terms of like how complicated the card is in the actual meta that we're in right now. So yeah, and remember, we're gonna be in this meta for at least like a week or so until they like micro adjust afterwards, and yeah, like I know it's kind of a somber, disappointed, hurt tone on this Lightforge podcast with the
Your analogies
news.
didn't make it any better.
My analogies were on point and very fitting if you don't get emotionally attached to them. And as we've learned, you know, from the last few Lightforges, right, with the jungles and the monkeys and all the analogies, you just can't get emotionally attached. Emotional attachment makes you function like Team 5, and we know how that turns out. So learn from this. Learn from this, and that'll make you a better arena player. And also remember, Team 5 didn't do anything to support the arena in any way, shape, or form for like
3 years.
No, they did some stuff. They started like taking cards out of the arena or whatever, but like for like a year and a half, right? Like maybe not even 2 years. Like by then they were like purposely printing better warrior cards and things like that. Like they didn't have a system or anything, but they were like starting to touch it. But like at least a year and a half, maybe 2.5 years, they really didn't do much with the arena. And by much I mean at all. And then they did like little bits for the arena. And there are still people like us, like Trump, like Hafu, like Crip, Ratsma back in the day, who just took arena very seriously, and we played and we were competitive with it, right? We were still infinite arena players, top arena players. It was still fun. And you saw what happened when we went back to a meta similar to it in Rise of the Max, and that's with the bucketing system, and that's with micro adjusts. So you can imagine how bad things were back then, and it was still an enjoyable game. So, like, as much as Blizzard is probably moving away from like doing anything for players like us, we also don't like 100% need them to do anything for us to like exist, right? Like it'd make a much better game, and they're missing a huge opportunity to make the game in whatever direction. But if they're taking it another direction, as they've been this year, it doesn't mean that we're going away or that you should stop playing arena. It's just not going to be as good as it could have been. It may be not as good as it was last year in terms of the balance. But and well, okay, in terms of the balance class-wise, it's going to be fine because they still have micro adjust, but it's probably not going to be good in terms of diversity, right? And your drafts are going to be a lot more boring, which means your decks are going to look a lot more samey. But I just mean it's not like if you look at the big picture, right? Step aside and like look at the jungle and the instead of the trees. Yeah, you're fine. Arena's fine in the big picture. Competitive arena is even not going to do all that bad, and that's if Blizzard just does nothing from now on to like help us as players. I want to end on that kind of like. I'm not hopeful about Blizzard, right? I'm not hopeful about Team 5, but limited formats can take a lot of beating and not break on the competitive end. And Arena's a limited format, so we have that to fall back on without Blizzard support. That's it for us. See you guys next week for the Lightforge. Until then, this is Adwicta.
This is Merps. See you guys.